What's up guys, my name's Ash and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video guys, we've got some custom tactics and player instructions for the 3-4-2-1 formation. But just before we get into the video guys, please be sure to drop this a thumbs up as it does really help me out. It's team of the season, so if you guys need any coins, make sure you check out MMOXP.com. Their link is down in the description. They're fast, cheap and reliable, and if you use my code Rema, you can get yourself a nice 5% discount. Okay guys, so starting off with the custom tactics. For the defensive style, I like to have this on balance. This is the same for every formation I use, and the reason I do this is because it gives me the best control over my defenders. So when I want to press higher and apply pressure, I'm able to do so, and then when I want to drop back, be a little bit more passive, I'm also able to do so because we've got the balanced style. The other settings are a little bit one-dimensional, and I'm not a big fan of them personally. Moving on to the defensive width, guys, I like to have this on 35. The reason for this is the 3-4-2-1 can defend in a 5-back formation, so we can actually sacrifice a bit of the width that we would need with like a 4-back formation because of the extra player. So we can get away with using a bit more of a narrow width because the 5 players will still provide enough natural width to cover the wider areas. So 35 width makes us really good in the narrow areas, and it also makes us able to cover the wings as well. Moving on to the depth, guys, I like to have this on 55. This is because it's a really nice balanced defensive line in my opinion. Your defensive line isn't too deep to the point where your opponents are constantly applying pressure on you and you're always, getting attacked. And on the flip side, it's not too high to the point where one through ball will completely ruin you. So I like to have this on 55, so sometimes we can defend a little bit deeper and other times we can win the ball a bit further up the pitch. It's kind of like a balanced depth in my opinion. Moving on to build-up play, guys, I suggest using balance. This is because it's by far the most consistent in the game. Basically, with build-up, you can play slowly, you can play quickly, you can do whatever you want when you want. If you use something like slow build-up or fast build-up, it's very restricted because if you use fast build-up, for example, and then you decide you want to play a bit slower, you're not really able to do that. But with balance, you can kind of pick and choose when you want to play slower and when you want to play a little bit faster. Moving on to chance creation, guys, I suggest using direct passing. This is because it's by far the most meta option in the game, and what this setting will do is it'll make your attacking players bunch up against the opposition defenders, so you can do like the really overpowered 1v1 isolation plays. Players also make really good movements in the box, so you can get off that extra pass to guarantee the goals. In my opinion, direct passing is the most important tactic out of them all. Moving on to the width, guys, I have this on 46. It's not really a specific number, but the reason I've settled on around 46 is because I don't want to have my width crazy high, even though this can be used as a wider formation, because I feel like players are just feel way too spread out, and playing simple passes can actually be more difficult. And on the flip side, I don't like to have the width really low because then I feel like the formation's too narrow. So I kind of just go for something like 46. It really doesn't matter. I suggest anything from like even 40 to 50, 40 being more narrow, 50 being a bit wider, but honestly I've just used 46 and it works quite well. Moving on to players in box, guys, I have this on 5. This is bang in the middle. This is so I can get some players into the box to create those chances, but at the same time I don't overcommit the entire team to the point where we're always getting counter-attacked. As for corners and free kicks, I have these on 1 because there's a set piece routine that I use which requires these to be on 1. There is a link to that in the top right hand corner of the screen if you are interested. Now I'm just going to make some suggestions on the players you can use in this formation, because a lot of people are like, what type of players should I use and where should I use them? So I'm just going to give you some suggestions to help you out if you're struggling. Sorry about that, that's my phone. But starting off with the striker, guys, I like to go for like a nice well-rounded player. This is because it is a 1-striker formation, so we kind of have to compensate for the fact that there's 1 striker instead of 2. So where you could get the balance between 2 strikers in a 2-striker formation by having like one more creative player and then a more clinical finisher next to him, you kind of have to get that all in one in a 1-striker formation. So I suggest using a player that can do a bit of everything, shoot on either foot, and I feel like you'll find it a lot easier that way in my opinion. Moving on to the right forward and the left forward, you can pretty much use whoever you want, but just make sure that they've got really good attacking ability, of course, because they are still forwards. They're still going to need to finish chances. They're also going to have to create for the striker. So I would suggest like fast players, players with good dribbling, players with good shooting and passing as well. Just go for a really good all-round attack attacker. Otherwise you might struggle, in my opinion. Moving on to the right mid and the left mid, you have a bit of a choice here. So basically the right mid and the left mid, when we don't have the ball, they will come back to defend in a 5-back. So Roberto Carlos, in my case, will come next to Koundé and defend as a left wing back, and Saka will come back to defend as a right wing back. So what you can do is you can go for like fullbacks in the position, so they're really good defensively, maybe lacking a bit of attacking ability, or you could do what I do, where I have like one winger, like an actual winger in the like right mid position, and then an actual fullback in the other position. So we've kind of got like a nice balance. You guys don't have to do that. You could use 2 actual wingers if you like, or 2 fullbacks, but that's just a suggestion on you know, what you could use really. Moving on to the left centre mid, I like to go for a more defensive minded midfielder. This is somebody that's going to stay back, break up the play, make sure we're as good defensively as possible. So I suggest a medium high work rate if you can get it, as you get the maximum contribution in defence and they're not too bothered about going forward. Moving on to the right centre mid, I like to go for a more box to box style player. This is somebody that's going to attack and defend, help us with the transitional play. So I would suggest somebody with a high work rate if you can get it, as you get the maximum contribution in both attack and defense. But I would just ensure that this player has a nice well-rounded card, so they're capable to do a bit of everything. Moving on to the 3 centre backs, these just need to be meta players really. They just need to be fast players, strong players, tool players, you know, medium high work rate if you can get it. But yeah, there's not too much to say about the defenders, honestly guys, and there's not much to say about the keeper either, because that really does not matter. Now moving on to the player instructions, guys. On the striker, I like to have him on stay central and mixed attack. I have him on stay central because I don't want him drifting off into the wider areas. He is my striker, so it is important that he's always in the correct position. We don't want him drifting out super wide, otherwise he's not going to be much use to us. We also have him on mixed attack, as I feel like you get a lot more out of the players this way. When you put your striker on getting behind, they always make the same one-dimensional runs. It's very predictable to play against, and I actually find it more difficult to score goals that way. Putting the player on mixed attack means they get more dynamic runs, they offer support in the build-up, and you just get a lot more out of them, in my opinion. Moving on to the right forward and the left forward, I have them both on stay central and mixed attack as well. The reason I have them on stay central is because we don't really need them covering the wider areas, as we've already got the right mid and the left mid to do that. So we want them to cover the more central areas, so we've got players both wide and narrow at the same time. They get into the pockets of space that are really difficult for your opponents to mark, and I find them to be the most deadly in the more central areas. I also have them on mixed attack kind of for the same reason as the striker, where I just feel like you get a lot more dynamic movements out of the players, and it's just a bit easier to attack as a whole. Moving on to the left mid and the right mid, very important setting here. We have them on comeback on defense, because basically when we don't have the ball and we have the right mid and left mid on comeback on defense, it means they're going to come back to make it defend as a 5 at the back, which is super important, so we can be really good in attack and defense. This is what makes this formation super overpowered, so make sure you've got them on comeback on defense. I also have them on stay wide and getting behind. We have them on stay wide because if you remember what I said about the right forward and the left forward, we have them on stay central, so they cover the more narrow areas, and we want the right mid and the left mid to stay wide, so they cover the wider areas. So we've got players covering the central and wide areas at the same time. We also have them on getting behind, so they're always looking to make those runs down the wing to give us a wider option. Super useful to have, in my opinion. But yeah, moving on to the left centre mid, the more defensive player, we have him on stay back while attacking and cover centre. We have him on stay back because he's a defensive player, so we don't want him flying forward, and most importantly we have him on cover centre, so he does defend those central areas. Moving on to the right centre mid, the more box to box style player, we have him on the default settings and cover centre. We have him on default settings because he is a box to box player, so we don't really want to restrict him that much, kind of let him do his own thing. And then we have him on cover centre, so he does actually defend centrally. Moving on to the 3 centre backs, I have them on default settings and I do not touch them, and the same goes for the goalkeeper, but you could put them on comes for crosses and sweeper keeper if you would prefer. But yeah guys, they're my custom tactics and player instructions for the 3-4-2-1. If you have enjoyed or found this useful, please be sure to drop this a like, sub to the channel if you are new so you never miss out on any videos like this, and don't forget to turn on notifications. But with all that aside guys, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.